It was supposed to be more than just a game. It was supposed to be the next great, true survival horror experience. An experience like no other. And using a famous IP from a very famous movie franchise, it seemed like a match made in heaven. Being constantly hunted by an unkillable, unstoppable creature, while being forced to navigate a space station, giving you that claustrophobic, trapped feeling with a great presentation of atmosphere, and just having that unrelenting tension of horror of always constantly being stalked. It should have been one of the greatest survival horror games of all time, something that we had multiple games built from it. But unfortunately, that's not the case. Because in my opinion, it all ended because of one bad review. And that's a hill that I'll ultimately die on. This is AlienIsolation, and this is my story. What is up? Hopefully you guys are having a wonderful day. Back here with some more AlienIsolation. And before I get into this video, I just want to say thank you guys for helping me to reach over 2,000 subscribers. You guys are the best. I deeply enjoy reading your comments and interacting with you. It makes the videos making so much more fun and entertaining. So thank you guys. I definitely appreciate your support. But enough on that. Let's get into this video. Now, I recently just watched the movie AlienRomulus, and I deeply enjoyed it. I have my review up on the channel if you do want to check it out. But because I watched it and I was really high on the Alien vibe, it made me want to go back and play this game, AlienIsolation, particularly because, one, I haven't played it for a while, and two, the director of Romulus is a big fan of AlienIsolation, which I think was cool, and a lot of things you saw in the movie, including a few Easter eggs, were taken from this game. Long story short, it made me pick up and play AlienIsolation again, and I enjoyed playing it after all these years. But it also made me want to revisit the scene of the crime, and the purpose of this video, why I feel one bad review from the site known as IGN completely killed this game's chances of being good financially, as well as having another game in, like a sequel. Now you might think, okay, one bad review, that's not enough to derail an entire game. We get bad reviews all the time from, it seems like, reviewers. But the problem here is, this is 2024. Back then in 2014, there wasn't the disparity between reviewers and gamers that we have nowadays. Back then, IGN was the most credible and biggest gaming review site on the internet. So when people saw that bad review, not to mention it's a year removed from the terrible Alien and Colonial Marines, a lot of people just chalked it up to being, oh, I guess it's a bad game. But no, it wasn't. And by the time people realized it, it was far too little too late. And it's a hill I'm ultimately going to die on, and saying that that review ultimately killed this game's chances of being successful, as well as ever having a sequel. So I decided to go back to the review itself, which is funny because if you go there, and I'll leave a link in the description below, and I honestly implore you guys to read the whole review yourself. Read the comments to the review, and that will tell you maybe a more entertaining story than even I could, because they are definitely hilarious in terms of showing just how insane, like, this whole 5.9 out of 10 review for this game is. I can't even fathom, like, the lowest score I could possibly give this game out of 10 is maybe an 8.5, because it's absolutely criminal. It is one of the best pure survival horror games I've ever played. But I wanted to read this review again, almost as if it's like a therapeutic experience, going back to the scene of the crime and trying to realize what it is the reviewer did not resonate with them. So I kind of summed up like this, alright? The biggest problem the reviewer has with this game is that he feels like it starts out really great, but it overstays its welcome, and it's too long, and that it turns into a very frustrating experience. Now, here's the thing. I've heard people say that it's maybe a little bit too long, and maybe I agree to an extent. But as I was replaying this game recently, I kind of slide towards no, I don't think this game is too long. But let's just say that, okay, I've heard that before. That still doesn't warrant why the game got a 5.9. I mean, there's nothing in terms of the gameplay itself, the mechanics, it working. Like, it's a well-made game. So it doesn't explain why this game is getting over 4 points taken off because it's too long. But I started to get to the parts of why this person didn't like the game and why they basically were getting mad. They weren't, when you finally get the xenomorph off and you have those working Joe segments where you got to fight them, that it starts to kill the game and it kills the fear of it. Here's the problem, though. I like the working Joes. I think they're really creepy and terrifying, as well as I like the fact that they're weirdly polite even after they're trying to murder you. But the thing about the working Joe segment when you're trying to fight them is it's supposed to goad you into a false sense of security and make you think, okay, you got the xenomorph threat off, you're safe now. But no, it's just, basically a false sense of security. That's what I love the most about those segments. So, no, I don't see a problem with that. They also go on to say that, oh, the game tries to be a first-person shooter because, you have to shoot them and you can actually kill the working Joes. Okay, why is that a bad thing? I mean, what do you want me to do? Just run away from them? Yeah, you have a gun. Yeah, it won't work with the xenomorph, but hey, you can use it on the working Joes. But he goes on. Basically says that, hey, the longer the game goes, the scares disappear. Well, yeah, the more you experience something, the more you get used to it. That's anything. It's like a jump scare, it gets you the first few times, but after a while, you just convince yourself that you're used to it. But I'm going to get more on that in a second. He also claims that the game tried to end way too soon multiple times, but, pulled the fake, oh, it's not ending. Basically saying at the moment when Amanda learns of her mother's fate, that was the first time he thought it was ending. And then this says that everything else just seemed like a non-important objective, that once you learn Ripley's fate, that, the whole thing just goes to you just got to survive. Why is that a bad thing? I mean, I've been trying to survive since I entered the space station. Like, why is this a problem? I mean, that's like any true survival horror game. The main objective basically is to survive. Like that's what you want to do. What did you want Amanda to do once she heard that log? Just hear it and let the other guy blow the whole ship up and she just stand there and die? Would that be a better ending? Who's complaining about this? Not me. They go on to say that there's too much backtracking. Well, I guess you must really hate Resident Evil 1 Remake because there's a lot of backtracking in that one, especially compared to all the other Resident Evil games. But once again, why is backtracking a bad thing? That's kind of common in most true survival horror games. I mean, you want to backtrack. You want to be able to get through segments again that you couldn't recently get through because maybe you didn't have the item you needed. Or you basically maybe want to go back to segments and pick up maybe supplies you missed, or maybe get back things you couldn't quite keep at the point in time because you were filled in your inventory and resources. So how is backtracking necessarily a bad thing? I mean, it's nowhere near the means of like Resident Evil 1 Remake, and people love that. So why is it a problem here? But then they get to the paragraph that honestly I think sums up why they cannot understand what makes this game so great and why they fundamentally do not understand it and why it's basically why people love this experience so much. And I'm going to quote the whole thing. Rather than throw a new gameplay twist at you, Isolation, like so many games before it, simply spends hours making you run a funless gauntlet and contend with everything it's thrown at you so far simultaneously, including human, android, and extraterrestrial foes. Fright, this evolved into frustration as I got killed from behind for the umpteenth time, even as I crouched motionless out of sight in air duct. The survival horror joy found in campaign's early hours is completely permanently erased, even when you finally reach the end. And it's an underwhelming conclusion that doesn't adequately pay off the 15-20 hours you just survive. End of quote. And with that, I'm going to now say something that every true survival horror fan is basically going to say. Thank you, Captain Obvious. Yes, Fright turns into frustration. You're welcome. Yes, absolutely 100,000,000% correct. Do you want to know why? Because a key element to true survival horror games is the frustration of them. Having those frustrated moments, you're like, damn, how the hell did I survive this sequence? How did I get out of this scenario or sequence of events? It's kind of like, for example, in Resident Evil 4, the water room. Everyone always says, oh, that's the hardest part of the whole game. That's the most frustrating part. Or other moments in survival horror games. For me personally, in AlienIsolation, it was the medical ward. That's the part that really frustrated me the most the first time I ever played it. I must have died, God knows how many times, 100 times. But you know what? All those frustrating moments in true survival games really have that are really frustrating is you never hear players talk about that they're bad. They just talk about they're really hard and they will punish you. And there's a perfectly good reason for that. Because if they were too easy, you would just breeze right through it. You remember the frustrating moments more than you remember the easy moments. You know why? Because there are moments you sweat. You just figure, damn, how am I going to get out of this moment? And until in this game you get that flamethrower, you really feel like, damn, I got to stay out of sight. But you know what? Even without the flamethrower, there's so many ways you can get around it that this person seemingly does not understand in terms of the mechanics of the game. Yes, it punishes you. It's very brutal, but you want it to be brutal. It is a true survival horror game. You don't want the game to be a breeze and you just walk through like you're in the park with the Care Bears, because then you wouldn't really remember it. You remember the hard, frustrating moments because there's that satisfaction of eventually overcoming it. Like, you know, getting that ultimate rank on the hardest difficulty, unlocking a super weapon in like Resident Evil or something like that. That's why this person, to me, I honestly believe does not understand what a true survival horror game is supposed to warrant. But then they get into a part where they say something that really sums up why this review is so unprofessional. They basically claim that they played on hard difficulty, which they only did because it was recommended. And they say it was a terrible decision because the xenomorph can get you anywhere, anytime, give you no opportunity to avoid death and run away from it if he hears so much of a pin drop. Basically saying that a flamethrower blast or the Molotov is basically can ward it off, but it will basically come back after a moment and you have limited resources. Are you implying that on the easier difficulties he doesn't come and kill you and stuff? Because that's just not true. But also think about what he just said. He only played it on a hard difficulty, meaning he could change the difficulty any time, but also that means that he only played the game one time. You're a reviewer playing a survival horror game. Survival horror games are not typically long, and I'll get to the length, he says, in a moment, but if you were a reviewer, you would play through at least on all the difficulties to get the whole experience and then let people know like what to expect from each difficulty. Right? I mean, it's not a JRPG. I understand you can only play through that one time for a review. It's a long game, but this is a survival horror game. It just screams unprofessional there. And not to mention, hey, don't blame people for your fault for not changing it because you're too stubborn. But let's get to the whole runtime of it's too long. It's 15, 20 hours. Yeah, it's about this time it took me to beat it the first time I played it. But that's the thing about survival horror games. They're typically longer the first time you play it, right? Because you're just learning it. You're learning the mechanics of it. You're trying to figure out how to get past it, how to get by it. You might be exploring, you know, the backtracking, since that was a bad thing apparently in this review. You might be trying to find different areas or find secret locations that you couldn't get into earlier. Maybe just want to see if there's anything you missed. Those things add to your runtime, as well as dying and trial and error, because there's a lot of trial and error in this game. But you know what they don't talk about since they only played the game one time? It's obviously a lot quicker the second time you play it. You know, when I just recently played it, I didn't have nowhere near the amount of deaths I did the first time because I had familiarity with it. Like, Resident Evil 1 Remake took me about 15, 20 hours to beat the first time I played it because I got lost. I didn't know where the items were, which item goes where. But once you know where it goes, you can easily beat those games in an hour or two. I'm not saying AlienIsolation is that short, but damn, it's nowhere near as egregiously long as people make it out to be. I mean, I think it took me, 8 to 10 hours to beat it the second time? And I wasn't even trying to rush through it either. I was just normally playing it, but they make it out to be, oh my goodness, like, they extended so much time. But hey, that's part of the first experience. But it gets to what I honestly think happened with this review, and why I think this review is just a terrible review, and it shows a lack of being a credible reviewer, as well as just maturity, and realizing you're playing something with an extreme bias because you didn't understand truly what you were playing with. And I'll leave it with this here, what I honestly think happened. I think this reviewer was someone who played the game and didn't understand what goes along with a true survival horror experience. And after the initial few hours, they started to get really frustrated. And that frustration boiled to a point where they just wanted the game to end as soon as possible because they just couldn't take it anymore, the constant dying. But also shows that I don't think they really learned the mechanics. They're mentioning hiding out in a ventilation shaft. Well, you do realize those shafts and air ducts are usually what the alien xenomorph uses to crawl around into and navigate in the first place. So I don't know why you would hide there of all places. Also, you keep mentioning, the Molotov and the flamethrower. But you also realize you have other means to get around. You know, you can distract them with other things like your noisemakers, your flares. But be careful, if you use it too much, well, the alien with its AI is going to figure you out. And yes, the alien is unpredictable. And I'm glad he is, because if he was just a predictable thing that basically turns into, I don't know, like a Metal Gear Solid guard where he has a specific pattern in a field of view or cone of vision so he can see where he can see in his line of sight, the game would just be too criminally easy. Yes, it is frustrating and it brutally punishes you. Also, materials are scarce. Yes, it's a true survival horror game. This isn't going to be something like, I don't know, Resident Evil 5 where you find non-stop ammunition everywhere. That's not that style of game. And it makes you realize you have to find resources. You have to explore the station. You just can't run through everything, and you got to take your time. Once again, I just feel like this reviewer should have understood that at that point their review was in question and they were extremely biased against, because they did not understand what goes around with a true survival horror game. It's like getting mad at a JRPG because there's grinding segments, or getting mad at a racing game because there's too much racing. Like, duh, if you're getting mad at that, I don't think you should be playing the game in the first place. And at that point, I think they should have delegated the review to someone who can. And to this day, I wish I could go back in time and either give that bad review to a lesser-known site or have someone credible actually review the game on IGN. Because I will tell you this to this day, if that game got a really solid review, which it should have been, by someone who knew what they were doing and clearly understood the mechanics of the game, I'll tell you this right now, I truly believe we would have had a sequel to Alien Isolation. The game would have been so much more successful. And maybe would have had even a third one possibly, because this game, as I said, if you've never played Alien Isolation, and with a big boost it got since the recent AlienRomulus and having the director being a big fan of Isolation, same thing to go by, I hope more people could follow along and play this game if they've never played it. It's an awesome survival horror experience. The atmosphere is dead on. The xenomorph is terrifying. You're always on edge no matter what you're doing, and you're always feeling like you're being hunted. One of the things I love about this game is I love the fact that even when I feel like he's not there, I rarely ever run in this game, because that'll just lead you right to him. But yes, the game is brutal. It is very unfair, just like any true survival horror experience should be. If it's so easy, you're not going to remember it very much either. It's the frustrating parts that you remember because they challenge you, and there's that deep satisfaction of eventually completing it when you do beat it. But as I said, Alien Isolation not getting a sequel because of this terrible IGN review is a hill I'll ultimately die on, and why I believe it is one of gaming's biggest crimes. And I can only hope that one day that crime is eventually rectified and turned into a successful story. But I want to end this video on a good note, because as I said before, I do believe there's a huge market for great Alien games, because this game is not just any random game. It is a canon adventure. I mean, you're the daughter of Ellen Ripley, and you're floating out in space by the end of it, and obviously you see the light of some ship or whatever pass you by. We need conclusion and closure towards that, and that's something that I hope one day we can eventually get. And with the boost from this game coming back because of the movie, I hope we do eventually see people realizing that there is still a huge market for Alien games. But that is my opinion. I want to hear your guys' opinion. Have you ever played Alien Isolation? What's your feeling on the game? And do you feel like that bad review forever killed the sales and the possibility of a sequel? Let me know down in the comment section down below. But thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video, and hopefully I can see you guys back on the next one. Thanks, and I'll see you all later. Peace.